Well, more now on one of today's main stories. The Prime Minister is about to announce his plans to pump billions of pounds into the economy to boost it. Boris Johnson has warned the road ahead for the economy is going to be bumpy after coronavirus, and it's feared unemployment will soar. So has he come up with the right recipe? Joining me now is Jonathan Portes. He's Professor of Economics at King's College London and a former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office. We've seen the advance billing, a New Deal. Does this compare in any way with what happened in the United States in the 1930s?
Not even close. So the number that has been floated of 5 billion in spending, which as I understand it isn't even new money, it's simply some of the money that was already allocated, repackaged. That's perhaps 1/4% of the annual size of the UK economy. Roosevelt's New Deal was well over 100 times as big compared to the size of the US economy then. So this is really essentially fiddling around the edges. I think the crucial thing is what Chancellor Rishi Sunak does next week when coming up with a plan to combat unemployment, which is really the most pressing problem facing the economy in the short term.
Of course, you know, circumstances in 2020 are very different from in the 1930s. In your view, how big a stimulus package would be wise to help the economy recover after COVID?
I think it is less a question of the size of the package, but the size of the problem. So analysis from the House of Commons Library, I think, suggested, and that's as probably a good a guess as any, that unemployment could soar to the level of 3.5 to 4 million. So what we need is something that will, in the very short term, help at the very least hundreds of thousands of people back into jobs. So you may recall the Future Jobs Fund, which was a very successful program introduced by the Labour government in 2008-9 after the financial crisis, which I think created about 100,000 or so jobs. We need something perhaps at least double that size, and we need it now. It really needs to be up and running by September, when young people leaving school and university come onto the labour market and find that there aren't nearly as many jobs as there normally would be for them. So it's a question of the number of people and of the urgency of the problem more than the amount of money, in my view.
And what jobs are those? Because, of course, I believe there is a component on apprenticeships in this plan.
Well, that would indeed be very welcome. I think the sort of jobs that we should be talking about, two obvious areas, are social care, which of course we know has been hugely underfunded and understaffed for the last 10 years, and indeed before that. Government has chronically failed to invest in social care, and of course we're seeing the sadly fatal consequences now. So that's an area where we could put in a lot of money and create a lot of jobs quite quickly. The other area is in insulating homes, something that's needed up and down the country. We need it for the long-term future of the British economy as we move to decarbonise the economy, but it's also something that could create quite a lot of jobs in the short term, putting people back to work to make people's homes more energy and efficient. And you can see that would benefit the economy short term, medium term and long term, as well as the people that would be putting to work.
I think insulating homes is something that Dominic Cummings has reported as saying he finds boring. But what about the build?
Well, I find it boring too.
What about the build element of all this? How important a part does infrastructure play? Because, of course, that was a large component of the New Deal, the Hoover Dam, electrification of the South, and bridges in California and the rest of it. I mean, Boris Johnson's keen on that kind of thing. Is that going to help?
Well, I mean, I find insulating homes quite boring too, but that doesn't mean it's not important, useful and necessary. At probably quite a lot more than very big, shiny new infrastructure projects. There is a place for big, shiny new infrastructure projects. I'm not sure where we'd put the Hoover Dam. I guess if we had a barrage across the Severn, that would be the modern equivalent. Those are important, but those on the whole don't create huge numbers of jobs. They may create, the headline number of jobs may be large, but it won't be that significant compared to the hundreds of thousands that we actually need. We do need, over the medium to long term, to invest a lot more in our infrastructure. And I think what the government's planning to do on that is indeed very welcome, and it's overdue. But it's unlikely to generate the economic stimulus that we need to reduce unemployment in the short term.
And the big question, of course, can we get the money to invest on the scale that we need? I think we're already up to 300 billion on the national debt as a result of COVID. I mean, can we get the money?
I think that really, in my view, that really isn't the big question. It's not even the first, second, or third most important question. I stand corrected. I mean, in the sense that the problem is the economy. It's not the deficit. We need to fix we need to get people back to work after this crisis. The reason we have a deficit is because the economy has, for very good reasons, been shut down in the short term. And to avoid long-term damage to the economy, we need to get people back to work and to prevent mass unemployment. If we do that, most of the deficit will largely take care of itself, because we won't be paying people to do nothing and we'll be getting tax revenue back. To the extent that there remains a deficit in 2 or 3 years, at that point, we should indeed start worrying about the deficit, and we may need to put up taxes to fund public spending. But I do think that is certainly, that's not something we should be blind to, but it's not the either the largest problem or the most pressing problem. The most pressing problem is getting us back to work. Professor
Jonathan Portes, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, we're previewing